right.
I don't think we can get that actually.
All righty. Good afternoon, everyone. I am going to put everyone on mute just to be on the safe side. I know we still got people coming in and getting connected to their mics. So thank you so much, everyone, for being here for this Lunch and Learn. We truly appreciate your time and attendance. I want to be sure to let you know that you will get a copy of this recording and you will have access to reaching out to Paige. If you have any follow-up questions, please feel free to put your questions and everything into the chat, and I will be sure to make sure we answer them towards the end. So we're going to go ahead and get started. If you are new to the SBDC, I want to remind you that we are your tax dollars at work. So if you are looking to start a business or you are needing legal help or any of those things, we have resident lawyers on staff. We have a restaurant academy. We have a financial fitness program that helps you prepare to be loan ready and all sorts of things on commercial leasing. The topics just go top to bottom, right? So if you need to write a business plan, we got you covered. So these services are at no cost. You'll be assigned an advisor to you. And again, it is already paid for through your tax dollars. So here's just a few of the things that we do as far as like helping with loans, government contracts, some of the things that I mentioned prior to. And just be sure to take care of those resources that are provided to you. Today, you are supposed to be joined by China Naylor, but you can see that I am not China. I am Briajni Sanders. I am the market.
So you sure?
Let me mute. Sorry about that, everyone. But yes, I'm the marketing coordinator here at PCR, and all of your emails and things like that will 9 times out of 10 come from me. Today, joining us from FranNet is Paige Nickel, who is a franchise consultant and really a really great partner. Paige knows his stuff when it comes to franchising, and this workshop, as he was mentioning to me before, is something that people really enjoy taking. It was probably the most attended. So you are in good hands and in good knowledge. I know Paige has over 30 years, if I'm not mistaken, of experience, maybe 35. But we really, truly appreciate him. And without further ado, Paige, you can go ahead and start sharing.
All right. There we go.
Perfect.
All good?
Gorgeous.
Right. Thank you so much. Well, welcome everyone. My name is Paige Nickel with FranNet, and as was mentioned, I do a lot of presentations, and recently I've done some franchise trade shows in San Diego, Las Vegas, and so forth. And there's probably 20 speakers that come and present throughout the weekend. And what the coordinator told me is that this presentation was one of the most well attended. And I think the reason is because for people that are new to franchising or just starting to consider owning their own business or franchise, we all want to avoid mistakes. We don't want to make a mistake. We want to try and avoid them. And what's kind of cool, and as was mentioned, I have almost 40 years of franchise experience. All these mistakes I've made, some of them more than once. And I've also helped thousands of people start their own businesses. And I've seen people make some of these mistakes too. So what I've been doing over the years and years and years of doing this is kind of taking the mistakes that I see commonly made and then kind of put them into this presentation. And I think what you'll find interesting is some of them will really, really surprise you. So that's kind of a view of what's to come. So as I mentioned, I've been doing this for almost 40 years now. I got my start with a company that you now know as the UPS store. It was called Mailboxes, etc. back in the late 80s when I got involved. And not only was I a multi-store owner, I was also what was known as an area developer. So I built, developed, and sold 65 UPS store locations in the San Diego County area. So if you're ever in San Diego and you go into a UPS store, there's a pretty good chance that I developed that location, sold that location, and actually was a mentor to those franchisees. So that was kind of my introduction. But I got into another company, which I'll explain here in a second, called FranNet, and I am a consultant. And effectively, what I do is help people find research and fund franchises. And I've been doing that since 1997, and as mentioned, help many people over the years find and become self-employed. I've owned other franchises, some that you might have heard of. Stretch Lab, it's a one-on-one assisted stretching franchise. I've owned commercial sign businesses. I've owned mini storage facilities. The list goes on and on. So some of the things I've done are franchise. Some of the things I've done are non-franchised. But I think when it comes to franchises, I mentioned, because I've been doing it so long and developed so many different kinds, I have made mistakes. So hopefully you can learn from some of these if you decide to, take that path as well. But before we get started, people usually ask, well, who's FranNet? What do you do? Well, believe it or not, FranNet is a franchise. We have over 50 locations. Predominantly, I work the Southwest, San Diego, Orange County, Riverside, Los Angeles, and so forth. That's where I spend most of my time, but I also work in the Arizona areas, Nevada as well. But the way to think of franchising is think about buying a home. And if for those of you who have done that, maybe you're moving to a new city, maybe even a new state. But what usually happens when people say, hey, I think I want to move to, let's say Culver City. What they normally do is they go online, maybe they go to Zillow, maybe they go to realtor.com, and they type in the zip code or the city or what have you. And then, hundreds of homes, come up, pictures and everything else. And so we're like, well, I don't want to look at 100 different, homes. And so you go in there and you put in filters, here's my price range, square footage, number of bedrooms, so on and so forth. And then you put in all these filters, and then those apps will narrow it down to maybe 50 or 25 homes. But if you're really, really serious, that's not enough. What you need to do is you need to engage a real estate agent, and then you take that information to the agent, and they're going to ask you more questions and more specifics. And then they're going to try and narrow the focus down to 4, 5, 6 homes. And then if you're ready, they will take you out to look at those homes. If you find one you like, they're going to help you make an offer, do the research on the house, get the financing, escrow, everything else. And in general, they get paid by the seller of the house. So it's a way for you to go out, narrow down the search of homes you want to look for, and then get the expertise for doing that. I do the same thing. The difference is I do it with franchises. So I work with about 400 different franchises. So what I do is I help narrow the focus, and we'll talk about that a little bit at the end. I help narrow the focus down to 4 or 5 or 6 franchises. And then I help people through looking at those companies, doing the research, getting the financing put together, legal experts, so on and so forth. And I get paid by the seller of the franchise. So for those of you who say, hey, I'm not sure if I want to do a franchise, but I'd like to see if there's something out there for me. My services are free, and I've been doing this for a long time. And like I said, helped thousands of people. So it's just another process that may help you find the right business. So what is the first mistake? Choosing a franchise because you love the product or service. Now, this is one that catches a lot of people by surprise. And let me tell you why. Because most people presume that if they buy any business, whether it's a franchise or not, that it has to be something that they're passionate about. They're really passionate about the product, or they're really passionate about the service. And that's not necessarily so. Now, you shouldn't do something you dislike. So if you're like, yeah, I could do that, but I don't want to do that, then I understand. But let me give you a case in point. When I got out of college, I got a business degree, and I was introduced to mailboxes, et cetera, back then. And it's really not that much different than it is now. It's a packing and shipping store. Well, that's not what I went to school for. That is not what I thought I would be doing when I started my business career. But I looked at the business and I said, you know what? There are things about this business that make a lot of sense. It's a good service, but it wasn't something I was really passionate about. What I was passionate about, and we'll learn this coming up, is what the business did for me more than what the business does. So one of the things you need to look at is, what are your transferable skill sets? What are you good at? Now, some people say, well, I'm good at IT, or I'm good at management, or I'm good at marketing, or things like that, which is great. Those are, skill sets. But there are other things that you need to think about. Are you good at sales? Are you, good with people? Are you a good leader, and so forth? And then if you're like most people, there are going to be things you're not good at. So for me, social media marketing, I'm not good at. Accounting and bookkeeping things I'm not good at. So I need to find someone else to do that for me. Obviously, can you afford it? It has to be something that fits within your budget. And then things you have to look at is, why do you want to do this? What's the outcome? And this is why I tell people you need to separate the function of the business from the function of the business owner. So what do I want the business to do? Well, I want to make money. Okay, how much do you want to make? A lot of my clients want to diversify their portfolio. A lot of us in Southern California, we have a lot of equity in our homes, which is great. Maybe we have a IRA or 401k or something like that, some kind of retirement plan. That's great too. But we want to diversify. We don't want all our eggs in one basket. A big one that's coming up now is quality of life and flexibility. And believe it or not, the pandemic kind of created some of this, because people are getting used to working at home more, or maybe are doing that permanently or part-time. So maybe you're getting to spend more time with your kids. Maybe you're getting to spend more time traveling. Maybe you're getting to spend more time doing activities that you like. And I think what's happening is people say, hey, I want to incorporate that into my life, and I want that to be part of it. I don't want to just, work a job, 50, 60 hours a week for the rest of my life. People want independence, control. Right now, unemployment is relatively low, even though California, I think it's the highest in the United States. It's a little over 5%. It's still historically low, but we know that doesn't always stay the same. So sometimes people feel that when they own a business, they have more control over their life than, hey, is this going to be the year that my company gets downsized, or my job position gets taken away? And then maybe the most important one, excuse me, from especially my Southern California clients, is retirement. Now, many of you may be nowhere near retirement. Maybe you're in your 20s or 30s or early 40s, and your focus now is on raising a family and jobs and things like that. But eventually you have to start thinking, it's like, what does retirement look like for me? And I saw a statistic, many of you might have seen it, that to retire in the United States, we're not talking about California, we're talking about the United States, to live in retirement in a way we're used to. In other words, the way we're living life now, the homes, communities, travel, all those things, for people to do that in retirement, in general, in the United States, people have to have $1.5 million in investments in real estate. That's a lot of money. When you bring that to California, that number probably doubles. And a lot of people are blown back by that. And what I try and tell people is not, okay, you need to have $3 million if you want to retire in California. It's not that so much. It's like, what do you want your life to look like when you retire? So why people are buying businesses today oftentimes is a way to diversify their portfolio, but also something they can bring with them into retirement, so they can have cash flow coming in, and it's not just about their, the retirement accounts. Next mistake, choosing a business because you have experience in that industry. You know, honestly, that's something that most people think. They're like, well, I have experience with kids. Maybe you're a teacher or something like that, so I should do something in that area. Or maybe you're a fitness instructor, so I should do something in fitness or things of that nature. Interestingly enough, of the thousands or tens of thousands of people that buy franchises every year, less than 25% buy something in an industry that they're educated in or trained in or even familiar with. In fact, one of the things that makes my job so fun is that I introduce people to companies that they probably haven't even heard of. Sometimes complete industries and segments that they didn't even know existed. Now, these segments and these companies may have been franchising for years or even decades, but if it's not a product or service you use, you might not know their names. So when people come to me, one of my roles is to find businesses that fit people's goals and personalities and things like that. And then I tell them, you know, keep an open mind because we may very well be looking at things that you hadn't thought of before. So that is where I go from separating the function of the business from the function of the business owner. So the function of the business owner, you're providing leadership, you're providing structure, maybe you're doing a lot of the marketing and overseeing the business. But you don't necessarily have to do everything. You don't have to be the day-to-day operator in there doing all the administration and what have you. And so one of the things I like to get people to look at is, what do you want this business to do for you more than what the business does? Another mistake, the business has to fit my personality. I have to be passionate about it if I'm to succeed. And that goes to, you know, what I was mentioning in the first mistake is that's one of the things that I think people get most baffled by, because they think when I tell people don't buy something you're passionate about, they're like, oh, should I buy something that I dislike? And no, that's not what I'm telling them. But I tell them you may develop passion over time. Now, for example, I was working with a lady earlier this morning, and she was very passionate about helping other people, and she really liked kind of the health and wellness area. And she was excited about that. And I said, well, there are a lot of businesses that can help others. There's a lot of business that can help the community. There are a lot of businesses in health and wellness, but we kind of focused in on senior care, and there are lots of different iterations of that. But I said that this business can give you a lot of the items that you want, but it's also something she's interested in. But what I would avoid is what a lot of people do is, oh, I'm really passionate about, let's say, this cookie. So a case in point, my brother-in-law came to me and he said, Paige, I want to buy Crumbles cookies. And I'm like, okay. And I said, well, you know, Alex, what is it about Crumbles that you like so much? And he said, I love their cookies. They're really good cookies. And I'm like, okay. I said, what else do you like about it? And he goes, well, that's all I really know. And so I kind of took him back. I said, look, there's nothing wrong with liking the product, but to buy a business based on that alone is a huge mistake. And that's really what I see people do when they go to these trade shows and go online and things like that. They beeline it to something they're familiar with and something they're, you know, really passionate about because maybe they buy that product or use that service. And they don't really look at what the business is going to do for them. All they're really focused on is why they're excited about it. So look at the business as a means to an end. It's a vehicle for delivering you to your destination. So like I said, if your goal is retirement, passive income, diversifying your portfolio, giving back to the community, helping others and things like that, look at how the business accomplishes that. But that's where the last one goes, and that's maybe what I'm kind of driving at now, is successful franchisees are passionate about achieving their goals, whatever those goals mean. It doesn't just mean income. So I rarely have people say, I want to make $100,000 a year, and I don't care what the business is, as long as it makes that much money, I want to do it. I don't get that. People sometimes start that way, but once they start really thinking about it, they're like, oh, okay, there's a lot more things I need to consider. Now, here's a mistake that I made a lot of times. I've done a lot of partnerships. I've done it with family. I'm currently in partnerships with family. I'm in partnerships with people that are not in my family. They're just investors. And I've done with friends. I've done all kinds of people. And so a lot of times people say, well, what I want to do is I want to mitigate my risk. So I want to share the investment. I want to share the expenses. I want to share the risk with someone else. And on the face of it, that may sound like a great idea. But one of the things I tell people is if you are going to do a partnership, whether it be with a friend, a family member, an investor, it doesn't make any difference. And this is especially important with family. Plan the divorce early. And I know that sounds really pessimistic and dramatic, but what that means is figure out all the what ifs. So what happens if your partner dies? So let me give you a case in point. My brother and I are partners in FranNet. He runs the Pacific Northwest. I run the Southwest, and we share the investment. We share the expenses. We share the income. But we're both married. So if I were to pass away, technically my wife would inherit my half of the business, and she would now be my brother's business partner. And I love my wife, but she doesn't know anything. She's not trained. She doesn't know anything about this business. And if my brother's like, well, I have to work with someone who doesn't have any experience in doing this, that would be a problem. Or someone could become disabled, or maybe just decide that they want to get out of the business. So those things need to be planned early. Or it happens all the time, even with family, is you get into disagreements or arguments and or things like that. You don't see eye to eye on things. One person wants to go in this direction, the other person wants to go in that direction. It's like, how do you handle those disputes? And God forbid, worse comes to worse. What do you do if one or both of you want to get out? And then also capital calls. That's something we all think, oh, we're going to make all this money. But what happens if the business is not making money and bills have to be paid? It's like, okay, we need $10,000 to pay our bills this month. How's that taken care of? And then you need an operating agreement. How's this business going to be run? Who has what roles in the business? Who's signing contracts? How are contracts signed? Things like that. Now, a lot of my clients will do partnerships with people that will just be investors. It could be a father-in-law or a good friend or someone says, hey, I don't want to be involved in the operation, but I will lend you the money to do it. And that sounds great on the face of it. I've done that with my dad. But you got to remember the golden rule. The golden rule is he or she who has the gold makes the rules. And a lot of people don't realize that. So a family member might say, hey, here's $100,000. I hope everything works out really well. And then when things aren't working out, and they may lose that investment, all of a sudden they want to intervene and they want to be part of it. Or as money starts to be made, maybe they want to be paid off sooner or things like that. So the golden rule is the people that are putting the money in are probably going to make a lot of the rules, which is fine. You just need to define what those rules are. So partnerships are great. I've done a lot of them, but it's something that has to be prepared for. And usually we're going to hire an attorney to do those things. Next mistake, relying on the item 19 earnings claim in the franchise disclosure document. I know people are saying, what's a disclosure document? What's item 19? And what I tell people is that when you look at a franchise, usually the first thing people ask is, how much money can I make? In franchising, it's a very heavily regulated industry, and every franchise has to submit a 300-page franchise disclosure document with the Federal Trade Commission, and they have to update and renew that every year, or they can't sell a franchise. Item 19 is really a fancy way of saying Chapter 19 is if the franchisor chooses to give you potential earnings information, it has to be based on audited financial results. So they go out to their franchisees, they audit their financial information, and they publish that in this disclosure document. The challenge that I've seen people have is that they rely solely on that to determine how much money they're going to make. So it's a good indicator, but you really have to talk to the owners doing this day in and day out to see how close to accurate that is. And the other thing is, how long did it take them to get there? Months, years? How much time did they have to put in every week or every month to do that? How much capital did they have to invest? So on and so forth. So this item 19, which if you look at a franchise, I could help you with, and it'll be fairly self-explanatory. That's fine, but it's just not what you want to rely on exclusively to determine what your income potential is. Next mistake, misjudging how much working capital you really need. One of the good things about a franchise, and again, going back to this franchise disclosure document, is they have to give you an estimate of how much working capital you need. So they'll tell you how much it costs to start the business, what are the fees to start it, how much is construction, how much is equipment, supplies, inventory, and so forth. And that's usually a range, a high and low. But they also have to give you an estimate of how much capital you need to have set aside just for the business, not personal expenses, just for the business to get to break even. And that could be tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of dollars. So the franchisor is going to tell you how much capital you need in that business banking account, if you will, to support the business until it's going to start supporting itself. But you also have to figure out your personal expenses. Now, if you are going to continue your corporate job, which a lot of my clients do, and that's totally fine, this may not be a problem. You're like, hey, I'm paying my expenses at home. I don't need the business to pay my expenses initially. But if you're going to quit your job, or maybe you're not working and you're just going to go start a business, you need to make sure minimally you can cover your living expenses comfortably for 6 or 12 months, maybe longer. And again, when we talked about talking to the franchisees, you want to determine how long it took them to break even. And then, once they started making money, how much money are they making? And therefore, how much personal living expenses do you need to cover? We have to look at debt service. We have to look at, unexpected operational needs. Again, do you need to keep your job until the business is profitable? In California, a lot of my clients say, yes, if I leave my job today, unless I start making money in the next 30, 60, 90 days, my rent or my mortgage or my car payment or whatever doesn't get paid, then you can't leave your job. So if that's the case, then we have to look at businesses that don't require you to leave your job. And then when you're talking to the franchise owners themselves, is how do they fund their business? How do they fund their franchise? And were they taking a salary prior to breaking even? Now, this is an interesting thing. A lot of people don't take salaries as a business owner. They just take whatever the profits are. When you start talking to more and more owners, and you start talking to accountants and people like that, they're going to encourage you to start taking a salary at a certain point in time. Now, granted, it may be very low. So it might be, $30,000, $40,000 a year salary, which is probably less than you're making now. But there are some tax reasons why you're going to do that. And I know if you're like me and a lot of my clients, it's nice to know that every month there's a specific amount of money coming in. And then, if you have a very profitable month, then you're going to have profits on top of that. And this is where, Small Business Development Center and people like that can really help you, because one of the things they excel in is helping you build a cash flow chart. And we can talk about more, offline. Now, this is a big one, borrowing too much money. What I generally tell people because people say, well, how much money do I need to start a business? Well, franchises that I work with on the low end are $50,000 and on the high end are about $500,000. And usually the demarcation is businesses that are retail location based, like a UPS store or something like that. They're going to be $250,000 on up. Businesses that you might run from home, like maybe a maid service or something like that, they're probably going to be under $250,000. But I do tell people you probably need to have access to about $50,000. Now, that could be money from a family member, that could be money from a home equity line of credit, that could be borrowing money against your stock portfolio. There's lots of different ways to do it, but you probably need to have access to that today. And if you're going to do a small business administration loan, which a lot of people do, then you need to be putting in about 30% into the business cash injection. So if it's a $200,000 business, the SBA is going to require you to put in about $60,000, and then they'll lend you the rest. So I generally tell people, if you want to start looking at franchises, the most important thing to start with is the availability of about $50,000 of capital. And then we talk about financing and things like that in addition. Number 8, viewing franchise ownership as a short-term endeavor. And, everyone has kind of a different perspective here, but most of these franchise agreements are 10 years. Now, does that mean you can't sell the business, before the 10 years is up? No, you can sell the business anytime you want. All that it means is you're signing this agreement for 10 years, and then nothing in that agreement changes. And then at the end of the 10 years, you can sell the business, you can stop running the business, but if you're like most people, you're going to renew for another 10 years. So, 10 years is a reasonable long period of time. So I tell people you're marrying this company in many ways. So they are there to provide you training and support and these things over the long term. But you have to look at this as, hey, you're not going to go in and make a bunch of money in the first year or two and then just turn around and sell the business. That's probably not going to happen. It could take 6 or 12 months or longer for the business just to start generating cash flow once it's open. And if you're looking to start a retail location business, obviously you can't open until you have a space and that all the construction is completed. And I tell people that's another 6 or 12 months. So sometimes people say, hey, I want to open a UPS store. I tell them, hey, it's going to be 6 or 12 months to find and build your store. And then it might take another 6 or 12 months or even longer after that before it makes even. So you might be looking at 2 years. So you have to take that in mind. And then exit strategy. This is something I help a lot of people with. It's like, when you're done, whatever that means to you, what do you want to do with the business? A lot of my clients say, hey, I want to pass it on to my kids, or I want to pass it on to my grandkids. Many say, hey, what I really want to do is I want to be able to pull back from it, so I'm not working it full time. And then I want to be able to have someone else run the business and have that passive income. But in a way, that's good, because if you decide to sell the business, if you're not the person who's running that business on a daily basis, it's going to be worth a lot more money. Hiring the wrong kind of attorney or no attorney. I am shocked how many people do this. One thing when you buy a franchise, and this is really important for people to understand, is when you are reviewing these 300-page franchise documents, it requires someone with franchise experience. So you need to hire a franchise lawyer. Now, I have plenty of people in Southern California, franchise attorneys. Most of them have 20, 30 years more experience. But I often have people say, oh, well, my brother-in-law, he's a contract attorney, or, so-and-so, is a litigation attorney or something like that. And I said, hey, that's great, but they don't have any franchise experience. And so, I tell people, I'm like, would you go to an ophthalmologist if you needed to have heart surgery? No, they're both doctors, but they specialize. And so it's very, very important one, that you do hire an attorney, because even though these documents are written in I guess what you would say plain English, they're not a lot of heavy legalese. They are somewhat complex, they are lengthy, and there are a lot of let's just call them rules. It's like, here's all the things that you're agreeing to, and also this is what the franchisor is agreeing to do as well, and you need to make sure that you're comfortable with all that. So usually you're hiring an attorney not to renegotiate the agreement. You're hiring an attorney to explain things to you that maybe you don't understand or don't make sense. And you're also hiring that attorney to see, is there something out there that you need to know about? Did this franchisor file bankruptcy, or did any of their franchise owners file bankruptcy? Have they closed a lot of location? Are there pending lawsuits against the franchisor that maybe you haven't heard about, or things like that? And so a good franchise attorney will be able to dig deep into the company to see if there are any major red flags. So one, hire an attorney, and two, make sure it's a franchise attorney. Really important. And then, maybe this is the biggest mistake, and I am definitely guilty of this. Not including your spouse or your partner in the decision from the beginning. Now, what does that mean? So a lot of times clients come to me, and I'm kind of picking on the guys in the group, and it's probably more my male clients. And they'll say, hey, I want to buy a franchise, and so on and so forth. And I usually ask them, I said, okay, you're married, and what does your spouse think about this? Oh, she's on board. She's totally fine with whatever I do. And I have learned over time that's generally not the case. Maybe initially why you're out there doing your research and you're reading through all these documents and things like that. But a lot of people, and I'm guilty of this too, a lot of people will get all the way to the end of the research. They've talked to the owners, and they've read through the documents, and they've created the spreadsheets and the pro formas, and they've done everything. And then they think they're going to sit down, over dinner with their spouse and say, hey, honey, we're buying a StretchLab one-on-one assisted stretching franchise. And sometimes they don't get the response they're looking for. And I've had this happen. It's like, not that they don't trust the decision that you're making as much as they weren't part of it. How did you come to this decision? Why did you choose that company? Well, what happens if this happens? So on and so forth. And so what I tell people is, when you first start looking at franchises, as you start to look at specific companies, it's very important to have a spouse or partner, or even an advisor. Maybe you have a family member who's an advisor to, or something like that, be in on the initial conversations. Why are we looking at this specific company? What metrics, what attributes does this business have that fit what you're trying to accomplish? And that makes it easier, because when you're telling your spouse or your partner, hey, I'm looking at this business, all they're thinking about is, what does the business do? Oh, it's a waxing business, it's an eyelash extension business, it's a massage business, or whatever it is. That's all they see. They don't know why you think this is a good fit. And so that's where introducing people early on into the process is really important. Now, maybe once you introduce the companies and they're like, okay, I'm on board with that, maybe you can let them stay, out of the process for a while until you get to the end. I am finding more and more franchisors, if there is a spouse or partner involved, they're requiring that spouse or partner to come to the what they call discovery day visit, when people actually go out and visit the franchise. And the reason is that they want to make sure everyone's on board. And they also want that spouse to be able to ask questions and raise doubts and things like that. So really, really important to do this. My suggestion is that your spouse or partner is, part of the initial meetings, is, maybe on some of the calls with you, obviously going to meet the franchisor and so forth. But at the very least, I suggest that when we're picking out specific companies, especially ones that they probably haven't thought about, we need to tell them why we think this is a good fit. And you never know, your spouse may become involved in the business, or if something happens to you and you're disabled or unfortunately pass away, you know, they need to kind of know what this business is and what happened. So really, really important. And you definitely want to make sure you have their support. So one of the things that people ask me, and this is actually, you know, when FranNet was established back in the early 80s, it was actually established in San Diego, very much around the time that I got involved with mailboxes, et cetera. In fact, I know the founder quite well. And, you know, I learned why people buy the businesses that they do. And even now, people, you know, like I said, a lot of times it's based on passion. Sometimes it's based on a recommendation from a friend or a family member. Maybe you know someone in that business and you're like, hey, I want to do what they do, and all those types of things. But the most important thing to realize when you're buying a business, especially a franchise, it has to be the right match. And I always use relationships, whether it's marriage or what have you, as an example, is it has to be the right match. Otherwise, it doesn't work. And so the first part of that match is understanding what it is you're looking for. Not just the money, but you know, what are the attributes that you want this business to have? How does your personality fit into that type of business? Is it a heavy sales business? If you're an introvert, can this business work for you, and so forth? So way back when in the 80s, FranNet created something called the Entrepreneur Profile. And if you've ever taken DISC or Myers-Briggs or any of these, excuse me, assessment tools to get a job, what that usually the corporation or the person hiring you is doing is like, is this person a good match for our company? Not just can they do the work, but you know, what else about their personality and how they do things and so forth, and how does it fit? So we used a lot of the same metrics and algorithms, and we created something called an Entrepreneur Profile. The difference is this works to help match people up with franchises. And so, like I said, I work with about 400 different companies, and this is the first tool we use to help narrow that focus. There's no charge for taking it. I tell people, you know, you probably, it's going to take you 20 to 30 minutes. And what I do is I send people a secured link. They go to that link, they fill out the profile. I send them the results back, and then you know, we set up a phone call or Zoom meeting to go over the results. And oftentimes I have people take this that are not sure they want to buy a business, but they're kind of curious what it says. And so at the very end of the presentation here, while we're doing questions and answers, there'll be a little QR code pop up. And then that QR code, you can just click it on, and it asks you other things too. But one of the things is, do you want to take the profile, send me a link? And if you just check that box, I'll do so. So this is one of the very first ways of making sure you're picking the right business. The other thing is you have to follow a very systematic approach to research. And I see people make these mistakes all the time, especially if they're buying something they're passionate about. Oftentimes they don't do a lot of these steps because they're so excited about what they're going to do or what the business is they kind of put blinders on and say, oh my God, you know, this is what I want to do. And I tell people, I'm like, that's like walking into a bar, you see someone, you're attracted to them, and you kind of just put your blinders on and just, you know, go ahead. And then, you know, later on you'll learn, oh, maybe there's some things about this person, you know, I should have thought about before entering this relationship. So here's the steps. And, you know, the first thing is to take the profile. Profile is the very first step. Like I said, it's about 20 to 30 minutes. It gives you a lot of information. It's how we really start narrowing down the selection. And then we set up a meeting, usually via Zoom. And again, I highly recommend spouses or partners be there if that's part of your family makeup. And we do a consultation. Again, that's free as well. And we go through the profile, make sure that, you know, we understand it, we're in agreement. And then there's a lot more questions that I ask you. Remember that real estate agent analogy. I'm asking a lot of questions to build a model of the ideal business for you. And it's with that model, then we go out and we start identifying companies. Usually I start people off with 3, 4 businesses to start with. And a lot of people say, no, I want more businesses. And I tell them, it would be overwhelming. If you're really going to look at these companies in depth, looking at more than 2 or 3 at a time is probably too many. Now, what I do tell people is, hey, if we start looking at these 2 or 3 and we decide they're not a good fit, we will replace them with some, with others. So it's not like these are the only 3 we're going to look at, but doing more than 3, maybe 4, can be a little bit taxing. And then you have to meet with the franchisors. And this is where a lot of people get a bit confused. The franchisor has a lot of information to download to you. So the first meeting might be an introductory call. It might be 30, 60 minutes. They're explaining to you kind of at a high level what the business does, the history of the franchise, costs, and so on and so forth. It's also your time to ask a lot of questions. And usually people have a lot of, let's just say, doubts, concerns, whatever. It's like, hey, I need to have those addressed. But that's not the only call with the franchisor. Then they give you the franchise disclosure document. Then there's a meeting to discuss that. Then they're talking about unit economics and what it costs to create the business. And there's a meeting about that. Then there's marketing and training, so on and so forth. So there's a lot of meetings, and usually 1 a week, on the phone or via Zoom with the franchisor. And then also, that's when they give you that franchise disclosure document. And that's something that we have to read as well. And then we have to talk to the owners. That number 5 most important step out there is that you have to talk to owners. And here's the thing, it's not just the successful owners. Yes, we want to talk to people that are making money. We want to talk to people that are successful. But honestly, we want to talk to people that aren't successful. And, everyone has a different determination of that. But, maybe someone who's been doing it for a couple of years and isn't really, making the money they want to make, or someone that, got into it and said, I really want to get out of it. It didn't, meet my needs or what have you. And you need the full spectrum. And kind of what I tell my clients is you need to look at yourself, and then you need to look at the successful owners and the unsuccessful owners and say, who am I more like? Or more importantly, who am I more likely to run my business like? Am I going to run my business like the people who are not doing well? Well, that's probably not a good fit. Am I going to run my business like the people are doing well? Well, that's a good indicator. And then lastly, we need to hire an attorney. And we usually don't do that until we're, down to 1 business. You've gone through all these steps. You've gone to the discovery day. You've, sat down with your spouse or partner and gone through all this. And then at that point, that's when you actually probably are going to spend some money, maybe $1,000, $1,500 with a franchise attorney to go through all this before you sign anything. If you look at the top of this, it takes 2 to 3 months. Here's one thing that people don't really understand when they're starting this process is we are so conditioned to go on the internet and Google things for research. A lot of people say, I don't want to go through all this. That's a lot of phone calls. That's a lot of reading. That's a lot of, stuff. I just want to go on the web and I want to Google the business. And then I want to, research it that way. And I tell people, unfortunately, this process doesn't work that way. In several ways. First of all, if you go out and Google almost any business, let's say it's the UPS store, as far as the mechanics of the business and how it's run and things like that, you will find there is very little information. You might be able to find out how many franchises they have, when they started, obviously what the business does, maybe kind of a range of what the business costs to get into. But other than that, you're not going to find a lot. There's not all these videos out there with franchise owners. There's not all this information out there, pros and cons and likes and dislikes. It's just not out there. And the reason is for your protection. And the reason I say that is the franchisor And also the Federal Trade Commission, they want you to do your homework. They want you to talk to the franchisor. They want you to talk to owners. They want you to read through these documents. They want you to hire the professionals, and they want you to take your time, because this is a scary process. And that's why I said at the bottom, it's okay to be nervous. It's normal. But if you go through this process, whether it's with me or anyone that does what I do, you will get to a decision you're comfortable with. It's not going to make it less scary. It's going to, you're still going to be, oh my God, am I doing the right thing? Every client I have, including myself, goes through that. But if you've done the research properly, you will know you're making a good qualified decision. And that might be not to do it, and that's okay too. But again, please keep in mind that just going on, Google or Safari or what have you, and Google these franchises to get information, there's very, very little of it out there. And again, that's why people come to me. They're like, okay, there's 4,000 franchises out there. You work with 400. I need to narrow it down, and then I need a systematic way to research these companies. So one of the things that was brought up is, if you have any questions, type it into the chat. And then I will, pull up some of these questions. But one of the things, again, I want to reiterate is I'm here to help. My services are free. We talked about the entrepreneur profile. A lot of times people say, hey, I want to take that. Where do I go? You click on this QR code. It'll take you to a little menu, if you will, and you just check, hey, I want to take the profile. Paige, I'd like to have a 15-minute call with you. I have some ideas. I have some thoughts. How do I get your calendar? You click on the QR code and get that. And there's more information on there as well. And that, if not, just email me. A lot of people just email me and say, hey, Paige, I have a question. I was at the presentation. What about this? What about that? I'm happy to help any way I can. So I see we're at the Q&A. Do you want to run through the questions?
Absolutely. So I only have one in the chat, but since we are at the end of the presentation, if anyone would like to come off mute after I ask this question, you are more than able to do that. So the first question, or the question that I have in the chat, is, can you or your company assist in finding if a restaurant franchise back east can be franchised in California?
Yes. And I'm not going to belabor the legal part of this, but California is what we call a registration state. There's 13 in the United States. California is one of them. And what that really means is the Department of Corporations in California has to approve the franchise agreement, as well as the Federal Trade Commission. And I will tell you, not all franchises are willing to go through the cost and legal ramifications of getting approved in California. So if you come to me and say, hey, what about this company? I can very quickly determine, if they are in California or approved to come to California.
Perfect. Does anyone else have any questions? This is definitely your time. And you're welcome, Chantel.
Well, I'll take that as a good sign. Maybe I answered the questions, but I will say this. I know a lot of times people say, hey, Paige, I want to do this offline. I want to do this in private, or I need 15 minutes and I don't want to do it during this Q&A. That's what I'm here for. So email me, whatever you want to do, and we'll set up some time, whether it's via Zoom or phone or what have you. Happy to help. So thank you, everyone, for coming. I'm here as a resource for you. Just let me know what I can do.
I think we have two more questions coming up.
Oh, okay.
I first see Ms. Williams, and then we'll go to Ms. Gilmore.
Hey,
Oh, no,
thank you.
no.
Sorry. Oh, okay. Go first. I'm okay.
No, go Ms. Williams.
Oh, okay. It was just regarding if you guys provided help with like cash flow projections
I do
specifically.
not. There are companies that do that, but I do not do that. I'm legally not allowed to do that. Usually a franchise will give you a template to use, and then it's kind of fill in the blanks. And then I coach people how to talk to owners, how to fill in those blanks. rent, payroll, insurance, those types of things. So a lot of times the franchisor will have that template.
Okay, and I do want to say thank you. You actually did share some resources. I emailed you and you were very responsive, so thanks. I think that answer might be on that sheet you sent me. So thank you.
Welcome.
Awesome. Ms. Gilmore, I didn't hear you. Did you have a question or you didn't?
No, I didn't have a question. I was gonna say thank you.
Oh,
You're
awesome.
very welcome.
You're welcome. You're welcome. I see some people in the chat said they already sent you some emails, Paige, while we've been here. So you can look forward to a nice full inbox when we get up here today. But again, everyone, you will get this recording. Please give me like 48 hours. My staff is me and admin right now. So I have a lot of emails to answer from over the weekend, but we really do appreciate you. Everybody, please, a very great round of applause for Paige and all of his knowledge. Look forward to our other 2 workshops this year. Paige will be coming back and speaking some more on other great topics when it comes to franchises. So thank you all so very much. Enjoy the rest of your Monday and make it a great one.
Thank
You
you.
too. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Of course.